How many hours and years of our lives do we spend on work? For nearly all of us, we spend 30 plus years and 1/3 of our days in our vocation. More time perhaps than we spend at rest or at play. But this isn't a problem. Why? Because work is good. Work needs to be integrated deeply into our lives and must be in line with our most important goals and values. And if it is, we have a far more complete and fulfilling life experience. Welcome to the How People Work podcast, where we explore the intersection of how humans think and act and how they apply themselves to their work. When you understand both of these things, you'll be equipped to be insightful, compassionate, and compelling leaders. Welcome back to How People Work podcast. This is Jordan Peace. I'm joined by my co-host, Jason Murray.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, man. Happy New Year. How's it going?
Same. It's been, I can't believe it's the new year.
Yeah.
We're recording this.
This is real.
Mid-January now.
Yeah.
Just about. But it feels like it's February already.
We finally got here.
Yeah.
We had some trouble with sickness and...
You did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
and
rough.
A storm to knock the water out in our city.
Yeah, and then our city, it was like dystopian, you know.
It's so dramatic for the water being out for 2 days. Yeah. Dystopian. It was literally the end of the world, folks.
That's how it begins. Yeah.
Anyway, welcome back. Thanks for listening. Today we are going to jump into a topic talking about, actually we're gonna do a couple different episodes around the idea of the skills gap. And the issue with the skills gap, and the way I look at it, is the world's moving too fast. Mm-hmm. The world is changing so fast that people can't keep up. And as a result of that, we're finding ourselves, we're finding that we're good at our job, we're good at our career, we know what we're doing, and then all of a sudden there's a demand to be good at something that we're not good at, and then we're not as valuable as we thought we were.
Right.
And that's problematic.
Yeah.
Whereas hiring and employment practices for many, many decades were based primarily on education and on experience. Mm-hmm. Now it's more like, hey, do you have this specific skill?
Yeah.
You know, and that's a little intimidating. It's different.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's an interesting topic, and I think it's one that we wanted to get to because, as there always are at the beginning of New Year's, there's trends and things that people like to put out there, and so the skills-based hiring is kind of one of those predicted trends of importance. But it's a little ironic to me because in some ways it's really just at its core a question of how do we decide who's worth hiring?
Right.
And those are decisions we've had to make since the beginning of time.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, that's very true. And it's just a matter of how do you filter that? How do you know? And if work doesn't change all that much, like if, I don't know, like there have been some development in this, but like back in college during the summer, I used to work with bricklayers. Mm-hmm. And, they were the artisans and I was the laborer that mixed the mortar and said, yes, sir, you know. But they've been laying brick the same way for a very long time. I don't know exactly how long. I'm not an expert on the matter, but from what I could tell, I'm like, you could have been doing this 1,000 years ago. And so experience in that situation is like, what else do you need?
Right.
If you have experience, you know how to do this thing.
Knowledge of the trade.
Right. What skills are in question when you've been doing it for 10 years?
Right.
There's no question.
Unless there's an innovation in how buildings are constructed.
Yeah, something like that.
That skill is pertinent.
Right, that skill is pertinent, exactly. But, when it comes to something like, writing code, or when it comes to something like marketing, or, something that is in a highly changing, highly developing field. That's the pace of change is really, really fast, which is most fields, I would say, at this point. Medicine, I mean, you name it. It's not the same way. That 10 years, 20 years experience, it means something,
right,
but doesn't necessarily mean that the exact skills necessary for the job are within this person who has that experience.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
Very, very different.
Yeah. I was instructed not to go back in history. I can't help it.
Who told you?
I can't help it.
History?
The notes for
the
podcast.
Ignore the notes. Go back. Harken back, Jason.
Harken back
You old man.
in history. Well, I feel like the evolution is useful in kind of thinking about
It is.
why we are here today. Because you brought up like the bricklaying.
Are you going to talk about hunter-gatherers right now?
No,
Okay.
it wasn't going that far
just
back.
checking.
But it just made me think like there was a time where it was more straightforward.
Yeah.
Where it's like,
Whoops.
if you're a carpenter,
Yeah.
there's a certain set of skills that you have, and then you learn them
Yep.
as an apprentice from a master, and then you become a master carpenter, and then you just ply your trade, for your lifetime, providing the services to the community. And so it was a little bit more straightforward because the way things worked in society in those years back were different. And I think you could say the same is true to some degree when you get into the Industrial Revolution. We've talked about those eras of work history.
Yeah.
But, it was like, well, we're doing different things and the skills required were different, but it was still relatively simple and straightforward. But then we've kind of evolved to where we're at in the last 20 to maybe 40 years, where we transition into, what they call the knowledge industry. And then I think now we're kind of in this whole new world altogether, where the question is, does knowledge matter in the same way that it once did? So you can have knowledge of how to do something, but is your knowledge going to be relevant in a year or 2 years or 5 years?
True. And I think another issue is the talent pool for so many companies now is so much bigger as well, that there's not as much like, well, let me just look at who's right around me, and whoever's been doing it the longest, they're probably going to get the job or the promotion or whatever. But there's more of a sense of like, well, I could hire somebody fresh out of MIT that just did their PhD on this exact thing that I need done, and I can access that person, I can hire that person, they can work remotely for me. I mean, the world's just changed so much in that.
Yeah, so it's probably helpful to kind of dwell a little bit. I think you mentioned sort of in passing, but what is skills-based hiring, and how is it maybe different from what's not skills-based hiring? Because in some ways it seems a little silly, because you're like, we want to hire people with skills.
Yeah,
like,
we
so
definitely want to do that.
We've always been doing skills-based hiring, so we weren't before doing non-skills based hiring. But I think what was implied was the way that we assessed somebody who might have skills was different.
Yes.
And so what we used to look to was things like, do you have a college degree?
Yeah.
Do you have, a certain amount of work experience in a relevant field? And in having those things, it was assumed that you would then have the skills necessary to do whatever the job was that you might be hired for, because it was assumed that in college you learned certain things that would be foundational to your work, and in work experience, presumably you also learn skills that would be relevant to whatever job you were continuing to do.
I try not to broaden the topic too much, but when I think about this, I think it was something my wife told me, that she studied dietetics in school, and I remember her commenting like 2 years out of college, she's like, nothing I learned is relevant anymore. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what?
Around that topic, yeah.
Your parents paid what? I don't know, 80 grand. I don't know what it cost, at that point, whatever it was. And it's not relevant anymore, which calls into question, like, wait, so the knowledge is not relevant?
Right. It's out of date.
Yeah, the knowledge is out of date.
There's new knowledge that makes that no longer relevant.
Yeah, because then you go, okay, well, so my experience may or may not be relevant depending on my industry, depending on how fast things are changing, and then maybe some of my experience is relevant and some of it's not, and then the knowledge maybe isn't either.
Yeah.
Like that's wild. And I mean, what's fascinating to me is not fascinating in like a good way, like fascinating in kind of like a hard way, is, and I feel this at like 39 years old, that people younger than me, 10, 15 years younger than me, that are like well in the workforce and doing their thing, they're just closer to the things that are new. They're closer to the next technology. They're closer to the next, like, whatever, social media trend, the language that's used, the way people describe things, the humor that's changing, whatever the case may be. But it's a little bit of a nerve-wracking thing when you think of it strictly based off of, like, knowledge.
Right.
Or even based off of skill.
Right.
It's like, well, I didn't come up through school and like nobody taught me how to use Excel.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there's something you had to teach yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and I think the reason why I can balance that discomfort with a great deal of comfort is because I've learned to learn.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
And the reason why we will probably never be one of the, there's a stat here, globally 81% of companies are using skills-based hiring in 2024, or did in 2024, up from 73% in 2023, and 56% in 2022.
Big jumps.
There's big jumps, you know, and I get why that's the case. And if you were hiring, if you had a 50,000 person organization and you just need specific tasks done,
right,
then it's like, okay, I just need someone who has this one skill,
right,
and they just need to crank out this one thing that I need done. You know, that's a little oversimplified, but you get my point.
Yeah.
But you know, we live in this, you know, small 40-person startup land where it's like somebody comes in with a skill, like that's cool, but like we're ourselves going to change and iterate what we're doing so much that I would rather focus on hiring people that know how to learn.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's such an interesting topic for me because I think instinctually skills-based hiring in what's meant in the definition that I think's used broadly in the market is the only thing that I would have thought made sense.
Right.
And kind of what you were saying, I heard a quote, I can't take credit for it, but I don't remember where I heard it, is...
So you can take credit.
Yeah, so I'm going to take credit for it.
Go for it.
But so I'm not hiring you for what you know, I'm hiring you for what you can learn.
Yes.
And so I think that's what is implied and kind of lies behind this idea of skills-based hiring. And I mean, I think about my own journey, and I think, you know, you resonate with it too, because our career journeys have been kind of on the same path for quite some time.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was a religious studies major in college. And so I obtained knowledge.
That's what tech companies are looking for.
Yes, exactly what they're looking for. I obtained lots of knowledge, highly irrelevant to everything that I'm doing today. So from a knowledge perspective, not super practical. No. And then spent time in nonprofit, as you did as well, but then went into financial planning for a number of years prior to Fringe, and then, you know, didn't have background in technology or SaaS companies or anything like that prior to this opportunity that we're in now. And so I think the thing that I feel is really natural is when I'm looking at candidates that I might want on my team, I don't have any other criteria because my own journey has been one where it's been, what am I good at? What am I capable of learning to do in order to accomplish the goal or the mission that's in front of me?
Yeah, I mean, another stat we just looked at as we prepared was 72% of companies cite talent shortages as a major challenge for them. You know, so it's obviously playing itself out that, I mean, the way I read talent shortages is not like we can't find anyone to hire. Right. It's more so we can't find the skills we need.
Right. Or they're assessing the skills in the wrong way. Is probably part of how I would look at that.
I would argue that as well.
Yeah. Actually, it's a really cool story. I just saw this on LinkedIn the other day. You might remember Charles that we hired a couple years back. And he was coming out of a nonprofit setting and things like that. And I think in a similar fashion to both of us, didn't have, you know, a real professional resume, so to speak. And we were looking at hiring somebody for a sales role. And I just knew from my own journey, there were ways that I was thinking about skills that were going to be relevant and applicable to success. And so, you know, some might say we took a chance on this guy. I didn't feel like we were taking a chance. And so he's moved on from Fringe since, but I just saw on LinkedIn that he got President's Club at the company that he's with.
That's
and
awesome.
So he's been on this journey in the sales world. And he's being successful.
Because he's learned to learn.
Right. He's learned to learn. And I saw that in him. And I think that's just kind of a great example of, you know, you can find these people that if you're assessing them based on a degree or based on their resume alone, they're just not going to cut it. You know, they're not going to make the cut. And I think that's one of the challenges that companies face is like, when somebody applies for a job, a lot of times all you have is a resume
Right.
to look at. And so
Right.
it's difficult sometimes to cut through and figure out how is a candidate going to be assessed for, qualifications for a particular role that you might be looking for.
Yeah, I mean, it creates an environment where you can't, as a leader of a company, you can't just say, here are the things we need to accomplish. Go get it done, right? Because by definition, because the pace is moving so fast, things are changing so fast, the people that you hired 3 years ago, right, are behind, most likely, on some skill that they need. Currently, it would be like prompting AI to like give them the right sorts of output would be like a common thing to talk
Right.
about, right? But they're probably behind, which means that you have to train your people
Right.
perpetually.
Right.
Right? Not just like back when we were in financial services and you had to do like continuing education just to like check a box, but you really didn't
Right.
learn much new. But you have to actually train
Yeah.
your people, like teach your people, which means the leader of the company have to understand the change and learn themselves. And there's just all this learning that's required now.
Yeah.
Where that just really wasn't the case. It was like you mentioned before with like the carpenter example is you learned and
Right.
you did.
Right.
And then you kept doing for decades,
Yeah.
right? But I mean, it's very, very different. And I think, I don't know, it's something that, I think we do pretty well at Fringe, but something that like I'd love to improve in even, just to think about like, man, where is the shortage of like, where are people just faking it?
Right.
Where are people just out here just like, yeah, I know, sure, I could do that.
Yeah.
I know how to do that. Right?
Which we've had that. I mean, I can say too, for the example with Charles, and I won't name names with others,
Right.
but we've made mistakes in hiring where we thought people had certain skills
Right.
in certain areas
Right.
that, very discrete and concrete skills are
Right.
needed. And it turned out they didn't have them, or certainly not at the level that they had said
Yeah,
that
right.
they did.
Not with
And
the-
so
yeah.
as a result, we've actually instituted some tests on one of the teams that I manage now in the hiring process to actually ensure that, like, does this person actually have the discrete and tangible skills that are necessary for certain roles? So there's some of that too.
Yeah, exactly. So first you got to make sure that people have the skills they say they have.
Right.
And then you have to train them to make sure that they acquire the new skills necessary to continue to do the same job.
Right.
Right. And I think it's based on the size of the company, you would have a couple of different approaches. Like for me, in a smaller company, you kind of just need people to come in and like be a little bit more self-managed, be a little bit more like, if I need a skill, I'm going to go learn the skill. I'm going to find the YouTube video. I'm going to find the class to take, right?
Right.
Whereas in a larger organization, I'd imagine you would need a great deal more effort put into learning and development and things of that nature, like from the top down.
Yeah, I think there's a responsibility of managers, that like the at least the way I see this is the job of a manager isn't just managing, people on their team and the tasks that they're completing, but it's also coaching them to grow and to become better and to increase their talent and increase their potential. And so I kind of look at all this skills-based hiring stuff as sort of a great positive in two ways, because one, it means companies can find talent in places that might have been more difficult based on older assessment methods. So you can find those people that are maybe the diamond in the rough that like might have been previously overlooked. And it's also incumbent on companies to look ahead a little bit and say, what are the skills that we need from our workforce, and how are we developing people towards those things? So like there's a little bit of understanding what are the trends in whatever market or vertical that company's in, and looking ahead and saying, what should our people know? What else should they be skilled or talented in that we can help kind of bring and provide resources for them? And then I also think it's good news for employees, because if companies are looking more at skills-based hiring, then you as an individual can say, hey, you know what, I kind of like hate the thing that I'm doing right now.
Right.
And so if I can go obtain some of these skills, which you can do a lot more readily these days with, online training resources and certifications and all this kind of stuff, like you can go get a new set of skills that can make you marketable to different companies and different roles that previously might not have been available to you. So I think that's a good news, and I think contributes to something that we talk about a lot, which is thriving as an individual at work, and that thriving often is rooted in doing something that feels good and purposeful to you. And so I think there's more opportunity today than there ever has been before for people to get the skills that can help get them into opportunities that are meaningful and purposeful.
And they, like you said, and they can go get them themselves.
Yeah.
Like you need an internet connection, which I realize not everyone has, but like
it's widely available.
Widely available, right? To have an internet connection, to look up the things that you need and to learn those things. And I think it brings a more merit-based actuality to the workplace, right? Like, hopefully what this turns into is the people that deserve the job get the job.
Right.
And people that deserve to keep the job or get promoted in the job, as opposed to, well, you seem great and real nice, but you've only done it for 2 years and this person's done it for 10, or this person has this degree from this better school than you, and they're right. Which a lot of that has nothing to do with merit.
Right.
So a lot of that has to do with money.
Right.
Right? Or has to do with who you knew, or what neighborhood you grew up in, or like your family structure, or how many people ahead of you went to college, and all, right? And as opposed to in a situation where you're maybe not looking so deeply at the resume from a standpoint of like, how many years did you go to school, and where did you go, and what was the degree, and all that, and more going, oh, you're telling me you can do A, B, C, and D, and I just need to confirm that you can do those things. Then I think people are going to get jobs that 10 years ago they wouldn't have gotten, and deserve them. And really thrive in them. So I agree. I think overall it's a positive in the way that you are defining it.
Yeah. And I mean, it takes some courage too, I think, for people to step outside of their comfort zone and learn something new, put that out there. But I think, it can be done. If you can learn something, then there's opportunity for you. I mean, when I took on the role that I'm in now at Fringe, leading the product team, I had exactly 0 years of experience as a product leader.
We'll tell all our partners that.
Right. But, I mean...
No, we're proud of that.
Yeah, and I think...
We learn to learn.
That was the thing. It was like, I need to learn as fast as I possibly can, and I don't have some knowledge that I need to have.
Right.
And so, it's listening to podcasts, it's, getting a coach, it's surrounding myself with people that have some knowledge and experience that I don't have, and learning from them, and having humility to learn from the team as well. And, a team's full of people that know things that I don't know, even though I'm leading them. And so I think, it's also, not being afraid to maybe be embarrassed sometimes.
That's true.
Don't be afraid of what you don't know.
Yeah. If you never look the fool in life, you're not going to go very far.
That's right.
You just have to take those risks and put yourself out there. And I think truly you also, not to kind of negate anything that we've already said, but like business is business is business is business. You know what I mean? So like if you can lead a team in this area, you can lead a team in that area. And if you can be clear about your goals, or if you can think strategically, or those skills are applicable in other areas as well. And so it's really just about developing these like core competencies, and then you can go and do anything, and next episode what we're going to talk about, because I'm excited to talk about it, is like, well, how's AI going to change that, right? Because what are the skills, what are the competencies of the future, competencies, got it, of the future, based on the fact that AI, and I don't want to overreact to AI, but like, it's here, it's coming, it's doing more and more all the time, and like, we should probably, as leaders, but also as any employee, anybody that's early in their career or even middle in their career, should be thinking, what are the skills that I'm going to need to have in this AI-driven future?
Right.
And I think that they're very, very different than the skills that are valuable now.
I agree.
So that's going to be a fun conversation.
That is going to be a good conversation, yes.
We're about at time. Once again, this is How People Work. Thank you, Jason, for coming in with all of your all of your wisdom and all of your knowledge and your personal experience and sharing with us. Happy New Year, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Next time on the How People Work podcast.
One of the things that came up right at the end, which I think deserves its own episode, and so we prepared for that, is AI and its impact on this skills-based hiring. And by that I mean, how does it change the skills that are going to be most valued in the future?